There's a moment, still before dawn, when the world is entirely quiet. No birds. No wind. Just water so smooth it feels like glass. That's when Austria's soul shows up. And if you chase that quiet, you'll find it again in valleys echoing snow-tipped peaks and shores framed by forests older than memory. Today, I'm taking you through those places. The ones that don't scream for attention. But once you arrive, you realize they've been calling you all along. We're going deep into Austria's lakes and mountains, and at the end, you'll understand why everyone can't stop falling in love. When people think of Austria, they often imagine Vienna's grand palaces or the sound of Mozart in the halls. But what draws me back, year after year, are the paths that feel eternal, the lakes fed by glacier, the swath of spruce-covered slopes, the light at dusk that makes everything look sacred. This journey isn't about ticking boxes. It's about listening, to the forest, to your breath, to the moment. I flew in last May, after a year of crowded trips and clattering cities. I craved something and hurried. Something that could remind me why travel matters. So I set out, not on a map, but on a feeling. To a place that, if you let it, makes you see yourself as part of something much bigger. I woke at 4 a.m. The village was silent, except for my footsteps on dew-slick cobblestone. I reached the lake's edge at twilight. Fog drifted like ghosts across the water. I stood there, chilled, waiting for sunrise. And when it came, the sun crept through the mist, splintering gold onto the surface. Deer emerged at the shore. A heron landed. Lake Altorsee lies at around 712 m elevation and is fed by glacial streams from the Dachstein Massif, but what hit me wasn't the photo-worthy view. It was the presence of it, the quiet that had existed long before me, and will remain long after. By mid-morning, I was on the trail that skirts the Grauberg Plateau above the lake. The path climbs, carries you across limestone ledges, through fields of edelweiss, and finally to a ridge with 360 degrees views. I met Marcus, a local guide. He stopped where a sheer wall dropped off to a valley 1000 m below, and said, "This is where Earth decides to breathe." He had lived here all his life. For him, the mountains weren't just a playground, they were home, anchoring every moment. The Dachstein Massif gained UNESCO World Heritage status in 1997 for its geological and cultural importance. The trail forced me to pause. Not out of exhaustion, but from awe. I looked at my hands, and realized, this was bigger than me. Later that day, I traveled to the village of Hallstatt. It attracts thousands a day, but I slipped past the crowds by canoeing at sunset. The lake swallowed the town's reflection, pastel houses, church steeple, and jagged cliffs. I drifted for an hour in near silence, just the oars dipping in black mirror water. Lake Hallstatt is one of the world's oldest lakes, dating back about 10,000 years after the last ice age, and the town sits at 509 m elevation. A family of ducks paddled past. I closed my eyes and just listened. It struck me, we chase grand adventures, but sometimes the deepest travels happen in stillness. The next day, I headed into Tyrol. At 6 a.m., I met Elsa, a shepherd who rises before sunrise to move her herd across an alpine pasture at 1,800 m. Her hands were calloused, her smile lined by wind. She pointed to a ridge. "Up there is my father's hut. It's my life." Hiking with her, I watched goats crest the grass. Fog was still in the valleys, and I felt a quiet pull. Life could be simpler. Focused. Slow. Tyrol's mountain pastures, Armen, traditionally follow a seasonal pattern, moving livestock up after May and down by September in an ancient practice called transhumance. That day, the mountain didn't just show me its view. It showed me a way of living I'd carried with me, too full of noise, too short on pause. By evening, I was at Lake Wolfgangsee. I found a lone canoe and drifted out just as dusk bled color into the sky. The water darkened. Stars timidly appeared. I thought about all the people who touched this lake, singers, painters, villagers who've grown up between its shores. Wolfgangsee sits at 538 m, and the lake and its communities have inspired composers like Hugo Wolf and Richard Strauss in the late 19th century. I took a deep breath. The surface reflected every flicker of light, like the place itself held memory. I climbed above the tree line on a ridge above Lake Gozorsee. I started at dawn. My legs burned. The air had thinned. Then I reached the summit. No words came, just the quiet, so sharp it rang in my ears. The lake lay below, framed by glacier. Light was bleeding into the world. Lake Gozorzi sits at 930 m, shadowed by over 900 m of ice on the Dachstein Glacier, which has been retreating since the 19th century. I understood, this wasn't just nature showing off. It was offering space. Space to breathe. To think. To feel alive. When I left Austria, I carried no photos. I carried something else, a calm I've been chasing ever since. These places aren't just pretty, they teach. Here, between lake and mountain, I found space to return to myself. I whisper into a journal in Hallstatt. I realized, beauty without pause is noise. Here, quiet becomes sacred. Mountains don't impress. They invite. Lakes don't dazzle. They hold. If this journey resonated with you, there are more stories waiting. Stick around for more travels that don't just show, but feel.